Her daughter kicked her out with cold eyes and no explanation. Weeks later, a lawyer knocked with the real will, one that revealed secrets, choices, and a final gift no one was expecting. The silence in the house was deafening. Welcome back, and enjoy the story. The shattered glass caught the morning light like tears frozen in time. Evelyn's weathered hands trembled as she gripped the mop handle, her 72-year-old frame casting a fragile shadow across the kitchen floor. The broken pieces reflected her daughter's face, twisted with disgust, eyes cold as winter stone. "Mum, for the love of God, look at this floor." Denise's voice sliced through the silence, her manicured finger pointing accusingly at the scattered fragments. Her perfectly styled blonde hair bounced with each furious gesture, designer jeans pristine, despite the chaos around her. "It's absolutely disgusting. I'm embarrassed you live here." Evelyn's rheumatic fingers struggled to maintain their grip. The same hands that had sewn countless dresses, changed endless diapers and wiped away tears, now shook with exhaustion. "I cleaned this morning, sweetie. I just didn't get to it." Denise's laugh was sharp, bitter. "You're home, all day, doing absolutely nothing, and you can't even manage that. You're nothing but a parasite. A dead weight dragging this entire family down." From the leather recliner, Ryan barely lifted his eyes from the enormous flat-screen television. His beer belly stretched, his Chicago Bears jersey remote control balanced on his chest like a scepter of indifference. "Honestly, she's been here long enough. Time to put her in one of those homes." The words hit Evelyn like physical blows. Her knees buckled, and she clutched the mop for balance, her wedding ring, worn thin from 50 years of marriage, catching on the handle. Nothing stung more than being humiliated in front of her grandson. Little Billy, just 10 years old, with his father's dark hair, but his great-grandmother's gentle eyes, stood frozen by the hallway entrance, his small frame pressed against the wall. His Pokemon backpack slipped from his shoulder, homework spilling across the hardwood floor. The math, problems and spelling words scattered like autumn leaves, but nobody moved to help him gather them. His wide eyes glossed with confusion, and heartbreak darted between his mother's rage and his great-grandmother's pain. "You need to leave. Today." Denise declared, her voice devoid of warmth or recognition. "I can't take another day of your pathetic, sad little face shuffling around here. You're not my mother anymore. You're just a burden I can't afford to carry." The remaining glass in Evelyn's trembling hand slipped, shattering into smaller pieces that sparkled like broken dreams across the pristine tile. She bent instinctively to clean the mess, a lifetime of servitude carved into her bones, but Denise shoved her aside with unnecessary force. "Don't touch that, you'll just hurt yourself, and then it becomes my problem to deal with." Denise grabbed paper towels with theatrical exasperation, her movements sharp and deliberately dramatic. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't do anything right anymore." Evelyn searched her daughter's face, desperately hunting for even the smallest flicker of the love that once lived there. She remembered rocking this same woman as a colicky baby, singing lullabies through sleepless nights, sacrificing her own dreams so Denise could have dance lessons and piano recitals. But those memories belonged to strangers now. There was nothing, only impatience crackling like electricity, contempt carved into every line of her daughter's surgically enhanced features, finality settling over them like a funeral shroud. "I'll go," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible above the television's mindless chatter. She walked slowly to the cramped guest room that had become her prison, a space no larger than a closet with a narrow bed and a single window that faced the neighbor's brick wall. Her entire life condensed into this suffocating box, her belongings, reduced to whatever could fit in the cheap dresser Denise had grudgingly provided. With methodical precision, she packed a single duffel bag that had survived 3 decades of family vacations and business trips. 2 simple dresses, one navy, One grey, both purchased from the clearance rack, a pair of sensible black shoes worn smooth by countless steps. Her mother's rosary, the wooden beads polished by generations of desperate prayers. Billy tried to run to her, his small legs pumping with determination, tears streaming down his freckled cheeks. But Denise's manicured claws dug into his thin arm, her grip leaving white marks on his skin. "She's leaving Billy, and we're never talking about this again. Do you understand me?" Her voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. Never. She was never really part of this family anyway. The front door closed behind Evelyn with a quiet click that somehow echoed louder than any scream. The silence it left behind would haunt that house for years to come, seeping into the walls like smoke poisoning every conversation that would follow. But outside, in the gathering darkness, something extraordinary was about to unfold, a chain of events that would prove that sometimes the universe keeps its own ledger of debts and payments. The October night air bit at Evelyn's exposed skin, Chicago's famous wind cutting through her thin cardigan like icy knives. With nowhere to go, and less than $40 in her worn purse, she walked through empty streets that stretched before her like question marks, her suitcase wheels clicking against cracked sidewalks, her legs weakened by arthritis, and a lifetime of standing finally gave out near Lincoln Park. She collapsed onto a weathered bench beneath a streetlight that flickered like a dying candle, her body shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something hollow that echoed in the empty spaces where love used to live. The park around her was deserted except for distant sounds of traffic and the occasional bark of a neighborhood dog. She pulled her thin sweater tighter, but it couldn't protect her from the chill that had settled into her bones. For the first time in her life, Evelyn understood what it meant to be truly forgotten. "Mrs. Evelyn, is that you?" The voice cut through, her despair like warm sunlight. It belonged to Nancy Rodriguez, her old neighbor from the apartment building where she'd lived before moving in with Denise. Nancy stood under the streetlight holding 2 grocery bags, her kind face creased with concern and recognition. Nancy's weathered hands were calloused from years of factory work, but they were gentle as they helped Evelyn to her feet. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her faded coat had seen better decades, but her eyes held something Evelyn hadn't seen in months. Genuine human compassion. "What on earth are you doing out here, honey?" Nancy's voice carried the warmth of someone who understood struggle intimately. She had raised 3 children alone after her husband's death, working double shifts to keep food on the table and dignity intact. Evelyn tried to speak, to explain the inexplicable, but only tears came. They fell like rain on drought-stricken earth, washing away weeks of accumulated humiliation and pain. Nancy didn't ask again, didn't demand explanations or justifications. She simply wrapped her own coat around Evelyn's trembling shoulders and guided her toward home. Nancy's house was small and worn around the edges with creaking floors and windows that didn't quite seal properly, but it smelled like fresh coffee and homemade bread, like safety and acceptance. The living room was filled with family photographs and handmade quilts, evidence of a life built on love rather than obligation. "You're staying here, no arguments," Nancy declared with the authority of someone who'd spent her life taking in strays, both human and animal. Have you ever experienced or known someone who has experienced such rejection from family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn slept in a bed without fear of waking someone's anger. Nancy's guest room was tiny but clean, with soft yellow walls and a window that faced east, allowing morning sunshine to paint golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. Days passed like gentle pages, turning in a beloved book. Then weeks. Evelyn helped Nancy cook traditional meals that filled the house with the aroma of comfort. She sewed curtains for the kitchen windows, her skilled fingers remembering the rhythm of creativity. Together, they planted flowers in the small backyard garden, coaxing life from reluctant soil. One evening, while sipping chamomile tea at Nancy's tiny kitchen table beneath a lamp that cast warm circles of light, Evelyn whispered the truth she'd carried alone for decades, like a secret treasure. "I saved every penny I could," she began, her voice barely audible above the kitchen clock's steady ticking. "I worked as a seamstress for 30 years, took in laundry-cleaned houses on weekends. After your father died, I worked as a nanny for the Patterson family, remember them? And when my own father passed, he left me a small inheritance." She paused, gathering courage, like kindling for a fire. "I invested carefully, never touched it. I wanted to leave Denise something meaningful one day, something that would secure her future and Billy's education." Nancy leaned forward, sensing the weight of approaching revelation. "It's grown to over $2 million. Nancy's teacup clattered against its saucer, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. "Evelyn, my God, $2 million, and she threw you out not knowing." "She never wanted to know about my life," Evelyn replied, her voice thick with years of swallowed pain. "She only wanted silence, obedience, for me to disappear into the background of her perfect suburban picture." The irony settled between them, like an uninvited guest. A woman thrown away like garbage, possessing enough wealth to change lives, to buy the respect that had been denied her through simple human decency. "But last week," Evelyn continued, "I changed my will." Nancy's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Sometimes the universe's sense of justice operates on a timeline invisible to human eyes, but when it strikes, the impact reverberates through generations." Over the following days, Evelyn found herself transforming. The constant stress of walking on eggshells, of measuring every word and action against Denise's impossible standards, began to melt away like ice in spring sunshine. Her appetite returned. Her sleep deepened. She began to laugh again, a sound that had been buried so long Nancy barely recognized it. 2 weeks later, at precisely 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, the doorbell rang at Denise's pristine suburban home. She answered wearing yoga pants and a designer top, her phone pressed against her ear as she complained to a friend about the impossibility of finding decent help these days. A tall man in a dark suit stood on her doorstep, his briefcase professional and his expression carefully neutral. Behind him, a sleek black sedan waited at the curb like a punctuation mark. "Good afternoon. I'm James Mitchell from Mitchell Barnes & Associates. I'm here regarding the execution of Evelyn Bennett's revised will and testament." Denise blinked, momentarily speechless. The phone slipped from her ear as her friend's voice became tiny and distant. "What, she doesn't have a will? My mother never had anything worth leaving to anyone." "I'm afraid that's incorrect, Mrs. Morrison," the lawyer replied, consulting his leather portfolio. "Mrs. Bennett maintained a substantial estate, over $2 million, in various investments and savings accounts." The color drained from Denise's face as if someone had pulled a plug. Her carefully applied makeup suddenly looked garish against her pale skin. "What did you just say?" Ryan appeared behind her, still holding his beer, his expression shifting from boredom to sharp attention. "Did he say 2 million? However," Mr. Mitchell continued, his voice maintaining professional calm while delivering life-altering news. "Due to documented emotional abuse, neglect and forced eviction from the family home, Mrs. Bennett chose to exclude both you and your husband from her inheritance." Denise's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The perfectly ordered world she'd constructed, the suburban home, the social status, the assumption that her mother's love could be taken for granted, crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. "This is impossible. That money belongs to me. I'm her only daughter. I'm her only family." Her voice rose to a shriek that caused neighbors to peer through their windows with undisguised curiosity. The lawyer remained unmoved, having delivered similar news to similarly entitled families countless times throughout his career. Mrs. Bennet was very clear in her instructions. However, she did not leave the family entirely without consideration. He paused for effect, the silence stretching taut as wire. All assets are to be held in a protected trust for your son, Billy Morrison, to be released when he reaches 18 years of age. Until then, the funds will be managed by a professional fiduciary to ensure his education and well-being. Ryan's beer can crushed in his grip, foam spilling onto the immaculate hardwood floors that had once caused Evelyn such anxiety. You can't. Be serious. Furthermore, Mr. Mitchell continued consulting his notes with methodical precision. Mrs. Bennet has established a substantial fund for elder care reform in the greater Chicago area. She wanted to ensure that no other senior citizen experiences the treatment she received in this household. Denise's face cycled through colors like a traffic light, white with shock, red with rage, then a sickly green with the realization of what she'd lost. Not just money, but the respect of an entire community that would soon learn exactly how she'd treated her aging mother. "I want to contest this will," she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. She wasn't in her right mind. Someone must have influenced her. Mrs. Bennet underwent a thorough psychological evaluation before revising her will, the lawyer replied smoothly. She was found to be completely competent and acting of her own free will. The documentation is quite comprehensive, including recordings of your interactions. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn had been more prepared than anyone realized, documenting her treatment with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to protect herself through careful planning rather than confrontation. Meanwhile, across town at Sunset Manor, a modest assisted living facility that Evelyn had chosen for its emphasis on dignity rather than luxury, something beautiful was taking root. Using a portion of her inheritance, she'd begun transforming the place into a haven that reflected her deepest values. The tension reached its crescendo when Billy, now living primarily with his great-grandmother during weekends and school breaks, stood in the middle of his parents' living room with tears streaming down his young face. The weight of adult conflicts had settled on his small shoulders like an ill-fitting coat. "Why did you throw away Grandma Evelyn?" he asked, his voice breaking with the kind of pain that cuts through pretense and strikes at truth. "She never did anything but try to help us. She never yelled at anyone. She never made anyone feel bad." Denise, her world crumbling around her like ancient walls, reached for her son with desperate hands. "Billy, you don't understand. Adults have to make difficult decisions sometimes. Your great-grandmother—" "No!" Billy stepped backward, his small frame trembling with righteous anger. "You were mean to her every single day. You made her cry, I saw you. And now she's happy without us, and you're angry because she was rich and you didn't know." The truth, spoken with a child's unflinching clarity, echoed through the house like a bell tolling. Ryan stormed out, slamming doors and muttering about lawyers and unfairness. Denise collapsed onto her expensive sofa, surrounded by the material possessions she'd valued above human relationships, finally understanding the true cost of her choices. At Sunset Manor, Evelyn sat with Billy under an oak tree in the newly expanded garden, watching him carefully tend to the flowers they'd planted together. His small hands were gentle with the seedlings, his touch reverent in the way only children can manage. "I promise I'll never be like them," Billy whispered during one of their quiet afternoons together, his arms wrapped tightly around his great-grandmother's diminishing frame. His promise carried the weight of a sacred vow spoken with the solemnity of someone far older than his years. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of profound joy. "That promise is worth more than every dollar in the world, my Sweet boy. Over the following months, the assisted living facility transformed under Evelyn's careful guidance. New beds replaced the institutional furniture. A music room filled with instruments welcomed residents who'd forgotten they still had songs to sing. The dining room served meals prepared with love rather than efficiency. The garden exploded with roses and sunflowers, providing beauty and purpose for hands that remembered the rhythm of nurturing growth. Her influence extended beyond material improvements. The staff began treating residents as honored guests rather than burdens. Families visited more frequently, drawn by an atmosphere that celebrated aging rather than merely managing it. The waiting list grew long, with people seeking not just care, but dignity. Denise made several attempts to reconcile, motivated more by financial desperation than genuine remorse. But Evelyn, having learned to value herself through Nancy's friendship and Billy's unconditional love, maintained gentle but firm boundaries. Forgiveness didn't require accepting continued mistreatment. Years passed like chapters in a well-loved story. Billy grew into a thoughtful young man who visited his great-grandmother every weekend without fail, bringing sketches from art class, stories from school, and flowers picked from the neighborhood gardens. Their relationship became a testament to the power of unconditional love to heal generational wounds. On a spring morning, when Billy turned 18, he stood beside the small brass plaque that had been installed near the facility's main entrance. His voice, now deeper but still gentle, read the inscription aloud to his own young son, a beautiful boy with his great-great-grandmother's kind eyes. Evelyn Bennett, who proved that love, not blood, defines family. The words caught the morning sunlight like a promise kept. Billy's son listened with the rapt attention of a child, hearing truth for the first time, absorbing lessons about dignity, kindness, and the revolutionary power of treating every person as inherently valuable. She taught me that money doesn't make you rich. Billy continued, his voice carrying the wisdom earned through witnessing both cruelty and grace. Kindness does, and the wealth you give away returns to you in ways you never expected. Somewhere, in the garden beneath that same oak tree where countless conversations about forgiveness and hope had taken place, Evelyn's spirit smiled. Her legacy lived not in bank accounts or legal documents, but in the gentle way her great-great-grandson helped an elderly neighbor with her groceries, in the patient voice Billy used when speaking to service workers, in the understanding that every person carries infinite worth regardless of their circumstances. The morning sun cast long shadows across the garden, illuminating flowers that bloomed in testimony to a simple truth. When the world treats the humble like dirt, love lifts them like royalty. And sometimes justice doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives quietly in the reading of a will in the promises, kept by those who remember what truly matters. Congratulations, type 7 in the comments, so I know you stayed with me until the end. Leave a like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. See ya.